Well, hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. I thought today maybe tackle a topic that's not quite so controversial, and that is the depiction of quote unquote Middle Eastern settings in Dungeons and Dragons. There's been various stabs at it across the decades, primarily from the older TSR days, let's say. Modern day 5th edition, about the closest you get to it is the neighborhood within Baldur's Gate. That's kind of like a slum ghetto of people from Kalimport, which I'll be discussing here. And then you have, possibly some dash of it in the Chult setting from Tomb of Annihilation. But back in the old days, they'd made so much more direct stabs at trying to tackle these sorts of settings. And I'm not going to bury the lead here. I'm going to say that of all of them, the one I think did the best job actually is the Day of Alibar adventure module. It's a pretty thin little module. It's for like 10th level characters. But within it, there is basically the seed from which you can develop a whole, little kind of, Middle East Arabian style setting. I think it probably does the best job at trying to convey a Islam light in a fantasy setting without either doing like Al-Qadim does, which is try to, kind of basically recreate pre-Islamic Arabian paganism in the setting, and it doesn't do like Yalarum does in the Mystara, where it is perhaps a bit too on the nose about how it's trying to specifically explain who their stand-in for Muhammad is. Al-Akbar just kind of like vaguely references the fact that, people revere a great holy one, and that you have, like a kind of a dualistic temple structure where there's a temple of law, which is, I guess, the primary official state-approved version of the faith. And then there's also a more underground chaos temple cult that has to hide their activities a bit more. This booklet gives you a complete description of the city of Kaibar, which is the former capital of, like a little sultanate in the desert of the Arir. The sultan was killed when some invading armies of barbarian bandits swept into the land like a decade or so prior to the events of the adventure, and currently the palace is being controlled by like the bandit leader and his army and all that kind of stuff. And the mission is relatively simple because of a plague erupting in a neighboring city called Burgathi. Characters need to sneak in to the city so they can find the relics of the Sultan that the Sultan had been empowered to hold, as like a symbol of, like the Sultan's connection to the people, and as a representative of the Great Holy One and all that kind of stuff, which are like this cup and chalice thing that the characters got to, sneak in and steal. Complicated, yada, yada, yada. But as you, it's got a, well-described city, tons of locations, tons of NPCs to go to those locations. And as you start to dig through it, there's all sorts of, little subplots you can pick up on, and different, sub-factions even within the bandits that could be played against each other. You can have actually a really rich and developed full-length campaign all spun out of this, especially if you take all that information and kind of pre-map out what the characters from 1st to 10th level have to do before they finally get to go on the mission as described in this book. But, like I said, in the fact that it provides, just the barest hints of details and doesn't over-explain everything, because it's just, like I said, a thin little adventure module in its own way. I think that it kind of allows it to have done this in the best possible fashion, in a way that's, most acceptable to everyone involved. I don't know how to best put that. Runner-up, though, to Day of Al-Akbar, I'll place the Old Forgotten Realms rule book for Kalimport. It basically just kind of ignores the entire question of trying to, recreate Islamic religious culture entirely. It's just part of the Forgotten Realms with your typical Forgotten Realms gods and all that. Is just that for whatever reason the city is kind of Turkic as opposed to Arabian, and its kind of culture and its flair and language use and all that kind of stuff. As a city setting, it's fucking fantastic. I guess, you know, since they themselves say it's kind of more of a Turkic Islamic culture as opposed to an Arabian Islamic culture. I guess it's supposed to be a fill-in for Istanbul for the Forgotten World setting. I don't know, like, it doesn't, from what I remember of the larger map of Faerun, I don't really remember that Kalimport really controls like a narrow strait unless there's some islands off its coast or something. But in either case, though, it's a fantastic, well-developed city setting for, you know, all sorts of like Thief of Baghdad kind of stories and upwards. Very few city settings I find are really good for starting level characters. I tend to prefer having characters start off out in the wilderness or in, like, you know, remote smaller towns as they get their feet up under them before they start trying to tackle the city and all of its chaos and business. But this is one of the rare exceptions. This is possibly, I don't know, I hate ever labeling anything as my favorite of anything in a subcategory, but this is definitely like a top 3 setting sourcebook for D&D, period, is Kalimport. I only have one book for the Al-Qadim setting at the moment, and that's the Ruined Kingdoms, which describes the southeastern portion of the Al-Qadim part. It's also technically Forgotten Realms, but it's an entirely different, separate continent, so it kind of allows it to box it up into its own setting. It's what I was talking about and trying to kind of create a pre-Islamic pagan presentation. The thing that strikes me that's weird about it, though, is that, like, in a way, like, calling it Arabian Nights kind of doesn't make sense since there's no Arabs in the setting. You know, everyone's called different things. It's all your typical D&D allegory for other societies. And so, I mean, I don't know. It's not like they call Forgotten Realms German adventures, but, you know, you could arguably say that's what the, you know, mainstream Forgotten Realms setting is just Forgotten Realms, German adventures. Al-Qadim, Arabian adventures. So, yeah. The one that's I'm going to talk about last here, though, is the Emirates of Yalarum. Like, low-key, it's like, I really like the setting. It's one of my favorite settings within the Greater Whole of Mystara. However, it goes to a point of being, like, real specific about who the stand-in for Muhammad is in this version of reality. And so, you know, because of the way that the game's set up, like, they have him as just being, like, an adventurer who's on his way to becoming an immortal. The thing is about that is, like, from an outsider looking in, and the fact that it kind of presents almost like what a second century Islamic culture would be, because it's only been like 100 to 150 years since their great holy one disappeared, and he left, like, both intentionally having, like, this dual line of succession where both his mortal descendants and you know, a council of clerics, you know, at the top of his religious organization, both have right to place someone on the seat of sultan and all that kind of stuff. So it's also rather on the nose of trying to, like, kind of recreate within itself some sort of semblance of the Shiite-Sunni divide. The thing is beyond any of all that, if you just pause a moment, like, I do get that there is, I mean, how to best put this? Say if, you know, you're going to make another version of Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, and in your Jesus movie, you're making an explicit point of showing and depicting him as being nothing more than a stage magician who's deliberately trying to just con people with stage tricks that they end up taking to be as real and then going around and basing a whole religion upon. Well, in a way, by depicting their version of fantasy Muhammad as being just another adventurer in the setting, it's kind of like the D&D version of doing that. So I could possibly understand to some degree why, you know, the Emirates of Yalarum kind of has, like, been a little bit, you know, buried in time. All that being said, though, I still rather enjoy the setting. I feel it's one of the, like, top 3 starting points if you're going to be doing anything on Mystara. And it's got a fucking great cover. I mean, just look at that shit. So anyway, I guess that's about it. non-controversial topic achieved today. Be sure to leave comments, hit like and subscribe, and as always, stay waspinated.